Welcome to this special edition of the Fairtrade Africa podcast. I'm your host, DONUTS. In this episode, we move beyond the idea that certification alone can solve the deepest social and economic realities facing farmers and workers. Instead, we explore a more grounded, more human response. Fairtrade Africa's DONUTS program, which stands for Dignified Opportunities Nurtured Through Trade and Sustainability. This is where policy meets lived experience, where standards meet the limits of implementation, and where the real work begins, on farms, in communities, and in the everyday systems that shape people's lives and livelihoods. To unpack this, we are joined by two key voices driving the program, Thomas Mukhebi and Benjamin Asare. And guiding today's conversation is Sandra Ndlovu, Regional Communication Officer for Southern Africa at Fairtrade Africa. Sandra, over to you.
Today we're talking about the DONUTS program, and what's really interesting is that it's not just about certification, it's about everything around it. It's about the realities, the gaps, the human side of trade, essentially. Today, we are talking to Benjamin Asare, who is the project manager for DONUTS Ghana. And then we've got Thomas Mukhebi, who is the programs manager for the entire DONUTS projects that's in various countries in West Africa, Southern Africa, as well as East and Central Africa. And maybe to start us off, Thomas, is in your own words, what is DONUTS about?
Thank you, Sandra. DONUTS is a program that was designed to support sustainable development. It aims to do this in a more connected approach than typical development programs, because what we've realized is that for true sustainable development to happen, you need to address social issues, economic issues, and environmental issues together and not as discrete interventions. So the program aims to support the sustainable development of farmers and workers by achieving results around inclusion, income, decent working conditions, and strengthening the climate resilience of our producer organizations.
That's such a helpful way to frame it. What were you seeing on the ground, Thomas, that made something like this necessary?
Yeah, so this program was designed by different partners in the Fairtrade system. While we all realize that certification is important and has made a significant impact in the lives of our farmers and workers, there are some issues that cannot be resolved by certification alone and need to be addressed by collaboration with stakeholders outside the certification ecosystem. So if you're really going to address inclusion in communities, certification might address that within the producer organization, but what we want to achieve as DONUTS is broader than that. So this is the rationale behind the implementation of DONUTS. There are issues that can be solved by certification, but for us to have meaningful change in the communities, we need a program like DONUTS that brings on partners, stakeholders, and other entities beyond the certification ecosystem, Sandra.
From what you are saying, it sounds like certification is important, but not always enough. Benjamin, I would be interested to hear if you resonate with that. Thomas just said about needing a program like DONUTS. And then what were some of the things that you were seeing specifically within Ghana that was not being solved just through certification alone?
Yes, thank you, Sandra. So I fully agree with what Thomas said. Certification is good, but not enough to support all the needs that particularly farmers, cocoa farmers in Ghana need. For instance, certification that does not adequately tackle productivity at farm level. So as part of the project that we're implementing in Ghana, we have a component on dynamic agroforestry, which does practical training for farmers, which I believe certification does not fully go into that. Also, there are challenges like land degradation, illegal mining, which cocoa farmers in Ghana faces. Certification does not fully address that. But as part of the project, we are able to tackle some of these issues. We have access to finance, which is also, certification is limited on that. But as part of the intervention, we have a VSLA, which farmers are benefiting immensely from. So these are some of the things that I believe were lacking that the DONUTS program is supporting to address.
Thank you, Benjamin. So things like power dynamics, dignity in the workplace, even climate pressure, Those are harder to standardize, Benjamin?
Yes. So you have certification address some of these issues, but not into farmer level that we would want it to, and also see the effect thereof. But the project goes down to the ground, to the farmers, to be able to tackle these issues directly with the farmers and have results. So you are talking about the issue of power dynamics. If you look at some of the projects, the trainings that are being conducted, they tackle those issues. But then certification tackles it at the PO level, the management level, but the project brings it down to the farmers. So the farmers are able to directly benefit and are able to also resonate with whatever we train them on.
Benjamin, I'm staying with you. So when you think back to the first phase of the DONUTS project within Ghana, what is a moment where you thought, okay, something is actually changing here?
In Ghana, there are 3 projects, 2 child labor related projects and 1 climate change project. So one major achievement, which is still in progress, is the means of cocoa rehabilitation in Ghana. So as part of the project, we have introduced a system of agroforestry that we call the dynamic agroforestry, that we believe is the best approach towards cocoa rehabilitation in Ghana. But because of challenges with policy, we needed to go through a process to get the government of Ghana accept this approach and then adopt it as a national approach towards cocoa rehabilitation. Now, we've been able to engage the Cocoa Research Institute of Ghana, which is the body mandated to advise government on some of these interventions. So we've been able to engage them and they have accepted research into DAF. And so they have established 2 hectares of DAF at their research station, which they are researching to find out how best it could help to address challenges relating to cocoa rehabilitation. We have gone through 2 years already, and we have 2 more years to go before they can finally come up with their recommendation as to whether they are adopting it or they are not. But for the past 2 years, what we have observed shows clearly that they are in support of what we are doing and they agree fully with it. And so we are hopeful that at the end of the 4-year research period, we'll have favorable results to be able to scale up dynamic agroforestry in Ghana and adopt it as a means of cocoa rehabilitation. For me, this is a major policy change if we are able to achieve this as part of the DONUTS program. It's a major policy change and a major win for the DONUTS program and for all of us who are involved in this partnership. Another one I would also want to talk about has to do with the children that we've been able to support to come out from the child labor situation they found themselves in. Typically, there are some 2 kids who are physically challenged, and as a result, their parents were shy of bringing them out or sending them to school. As part of the intervention, we're able to fish this out, and as I'm speaking, they are in school and they are doing very well. So this is some of the things that DONUTS program is trying to support farmers in Ghana to benefit from.
So in terms of implementation, what made the project possible and who is involved in that shift?
In terms of implementation, we have a number of partners who are supporting the DONUTS program. We have commercial partners, we have civil society organizations, we have the duty bearers, the local governments, in the case of Ghana, who are all part of this intervention, supporting the implementation. So when you talk about the child labor project, the 2 child labor projects we have in Ghana, we have the local government and we have ICI, International Cocoa Initiative, who are very good at child labor issues. They are supporting, and then we have also some level of collaboration with UNICEF. They are not fully implementing, but we consult them and they give their support in terms of advice as and when we need them. So they have been parts of implementation. And then we have ITC, also an International Trade Center, which is a human organization. They are also fully part of the Sankofa project, and they are supporting with policy and a lot of activities that we are implementing. And then commercial partners like Hub, who are also fully taking care of the living income component of Sankofa. They are paying Fairtrade living income differential to all project beneficiaries. And this is really helpful to the farmers, and they are very happy about it. So we have all these, including, of course, the local government, which is the duty bearer, who also support the implementation of the child labor projects. Talk about the social welfare, who are always in the field with us whenever we are training farmers, who are also always there to be part of the remediation activities and also support us in the cases where we have challenges. It's difficult for us to handle alone. They come in to support and escalate it to the national level.
Thomas, I would be interested to know, when I was reading through the DONUTS project, what it stands for, what it is here to achieve. One of the things that stood out for me was the idea of farmers and workers' voices, them not just participating but influencing. What does that look like when it's working, in your opinion?
Yes, this would happen at multiple levels. Based on the experience that we've had in the program, there are two key gaps that we faced. So, number one, whether the farmers and workers are aware of their rights. And number two, whether they're able to access the platforms where discussions on these issues that may affect them are happening. So through DONUTS, what we've managed to do quite strongly in this first phase is identify the gaps and support the farmers to have this awareness on the rights that they have and the responsibilities that duty bearers and other stakeholders have regarding upholding these rights. So capacity building of farmers and workers has gone quite well. The second one of providing access to these decision-making forums has also been conducted in the first phase. Ben had mentioned a specific example in Ghana, for example, but this has happened across the other regions where the project is happening. In Southern Africa, for example, in the wine project, the project was able to achieve a significant milestone whereby we've been able to begin setting up a dialogue platform between farm owners, workers on the farm, and government to address issues in the wine sector. And in Ethiopia, a similar issue has happened with our flour producers. So again, having the workers, farm management who own these producer organizations, and government working together to address issues. So through these two means, Sandra, capacity building and partnerships and access, we've managed to bring the producers' voices to these audiences.
Thank you so much, Thomas. I also want to stay with you, Thomas, and ask, everybody's talking about the EU regulations, etc. So there's a global shift happening with that. I'm wondering, does that feel like pressure from the outside, or does it open up new opportunities?
This issue is quite complex, and I would take the following position. Ideally, if implemented correctly in an inclusive manner, these regulations provide an opportunity to address some of the key issues that farmers and workers face across the globe. So looking at the DONUTS priority areas, again, social issues, environmental issues, and economic issues. However, if these regulations are not implemented or developed with the voice of the farmer or worker in mind and having their perspectives incorporated, this can have the results that you mentioned, whereby these regulations are sort of putting additional pressure on farmers and workers. So I would give you that perspective. It depends on how these laws are being designed and how they're being implemented, Sandra.
Benjamin, when it comes to EU regulations, how is DONUTS helping farmers and workers to not just respond to the regulations, but actually to shape what's happening and implement?
Yeah, so in Ghana specifically, the interventions that we have rolled out, particularly the Sankofa project, even before the EUDR came into being, we were already implementing something around that, which already was addressing some of the requirements that were being raised in that document. So we look at the environmental due diligence in terms of the Sankofa project. We already adopt dynamic agroforestry, which we are encouraging farmers to cultivate more trees, avoid destruction of forests, because the approach is that you can establish a cocoa farm in even very degraded land. So you don't need to destroy new forests to establish cocoa farms. And then also avoid usage of synthetic chemicals, which is also injurious to the health of the farmers, and also does not help, sustainable production of cocoa in terms of making the land fertile for cocoa production. So that is also avoided. And then we also avoid burning, which could also, if it is done in an uncontrollable manner, could also destroy forest. So some of these practices were already being practiced by the farmers of the project, even before UDR. And then on top of that, there is this child labor project. So the KKCL marriage particularly is also a complement to the Sankofa project, which is a climate change project. And so you have everything in one. You have the environment aspect and you have the human rights aspect, all embedded in one project. And then there's also economic component where living income differential is being paid to the farmers. And so already the project responded already, even before the UDR came into being, it has already responded to the needs of the regulators. And so I believe that continuation of this project, you just have to add some few other requirements that needs to be met to have a fully compliance to the UDR. Also, as part of the project, we have mapped all farms as a requirement by the commercial partner. So every single dynamic agroforestry farm that has been established, we have a GPS location of those farms, which is also a requirement under UDR. So I believe we are responding very well with the project that's rolled out to the requirements in the UDR.
Fantastic. I want us to move a little bit into the next phase. I know we've touched on a lot of the next phase already, but I just want to know, it feels from the document that things are getting more focused, maybe even more intentional. Thomas, what's changing and why does that matter?
As you've stated, the design of the program in this phase is getting a bit more focused. One of the reasons for this goes back to what I'd mentioned at the beginning of this discussion. What the program wants to do is have impact beyond certification and beyond the producer organizations we're working with. So this means having more engagement with duty bearers, so people in government, buyers, and other stakeholders who have an impact on the quality of livelihoods that our farmers and workers have. So what we've done is we're currently in the design phase of this next phase of the program, but what we're trying to do is focus more on advocacy, focus more on building partnerships with government at different levels, local, national, and engaging with governments in the EU to address the needs and priorities of Fairtrade certified producer organizations, but through this work also impact farmers and workers who might not be in the Fairtrade system. So it's quite an ambitious goal, but we feel that it's the next step that we need to take in the evolution of this program, Sandra.
I was also really intrigued by the idea of South-to-South trade. Thomas, again, can you paint a picture of what that actually looks like in practice?
So one of the ways that people can have impact on the livelihoods of farmers and workers is by supporting them directly by buying products. So for example, for Fairtrade producers, one of the ways to have sustainable impacts is by growing the pool of consumers of these products. So what the program would try to do would be to expand the markets for Fairtrade products, which traditionally have been in northern markets, so Europe, the United States of America, and so on and so forth. If we're able to grow the market for these products in Africa, this would basically mean that more farmers and more workers are being supported through the Fairtrade system, and we achieve the goals of the Fairtrade system by having more sustainable livelihoods for farmers and workers, Sandra.
Thank you so much, Benjamin. So from where you are sitting, what are you most excited about or maybe even cautious about when it comes to that, to South trade?
Yes, as Thomas has already mentioned, it will expand the markets for our producers. Federal producers depend on the Fairtrade market to market their product. Otherwise, they wouldn't see much benefit from engaging in Fairtrade certification. So it will help. And then it will also, internally within Africa, we will also be able to have access to our own produce. So when you come to Ghana particularly, there are certified products on the international market that we don't have in Ghana. So if we are able to implement that, I believe we will have access to certified Fairtrade products on our market, which will also give us the opportunity to support our own producers. And then also, I don't know whether there will be also some level of non-Fairtrade product, but then they are products that have been developed by Fairtrade producer organizations. For instance, when you come to Ghana, we have soap, which is like an alternative income generating activity for the producer organization. So they make money from soap making. If we have those South-to-South markets, there's a possibility for them to also export to other African countries to make more money and also to build the cooperative and make it more robust and sustainable.
Benjamin, what does a sustainable livelihood actually look like in your region or in Ghana specifically?
So sustainable livelihood, we are talking about, basically looking at the cocoa farmers. Sustainable livelihood is having income that is living income, being given the right amount of money for the cocoa, whatever they are producing, they get the right amount, and then also are able to sustain the production. So once they are paid well, they are able to invest money in their business, which is the cocoa farming, And as they invest, they also make good returns. And so everything boils down to being given the right amount, sustainable income. Once they get a sustainable income, they're able to invest and they also make more money. So for me, sustainable livelihood all depends on the income they make from the cocoa. Not only the cocoa prices, but also everything within the farm that they could sell to make money. So as part of the Sankofa project, we also encourage them to cultivate other crops, which could also serve as alternative source of income for them. So everything they sell from the farm put together, if they earn living income from that, it's sustainable to the farmer.
Thomas, so let's fast forward a few years. So we're sitting here again doing another podcast at the end of this phase. What would need to be true for you to feel like this program worked?
As I mentioned, this program is quite ambitious, and given the scope is addressing quite a wide range of challenges that farmers and workers face. However, one key thing that I'd really look at as a success is that the program has managed to support the farmers and workers, first to understand their rights, who is responsible for safeguarding these rights, and them having the freedom and ability to take part in the decision-making on issues that affect these rights. So across the program, in the first phase, we've seen that supporting the producer organizations through different interventions, so issues around strengthening inclusion, ensuring that they support different groups in the producer organizations and in their community, strengthening structures such as worker committees, premium committees, gender committees, and building those partnerships where different stakeholders can have open discussions and frank discussions on issues has really helped. What we need to do is build on the results of this first phase and end up in a situation where these farmers and workers have a substantive role in shaping processes that affect their livelihoods. And this would be a success for me, Sandra.
This has been such a rich conversation. And I think what I'm taking away is that this work is really about moving beyond systems. It's about moving into people, into relationships, and ultimately into dignity.
That brings us to the end of this episode, exploring Fairtrade Africa's DONUTS program. What stands out is a clear message. Certification has value, but it cannot carry the full weight of farmers' realities. The gaps it leaves behind, social, economic, and structural, require something more practical, more responsive, and more rooted in everyday life. Through initiatives like financial inclusion, agroforestry, rights awareness, and community dialogue, DONUTS is showing what it looks like to move from compliance to lived dignity. To our guests, Thomas Mukhebi and Benjamin Asare, thank you for your insights and for the work you continue to lead on the ground. And to our discussion lead, Sandra Ndlovu, thank you for guiding the conversation. I'm DONUTS. Thank you for listening.